What's the highest stage you've ever gotten to in Risk of Rain 2? 10, 20, maybe even 100. The highest stage I've seen is the stage 224 run all the way back in July of 2019. This run is nothing to scoff at. It took them just over 16 and a half hours to do this, but I knew I could do better, so I took it upon myself to not only beat this record, but set a new one. I achieved a run so legendary that it will go down in the history books. Philosophers thousands of years from now will view November 25th, 2020 as the day the human race finally achieved enlightenment. Maybe not, but I did do over 1,000 stages.
Who is this?
Well, I'm Uncle Clunk!
A run like this requires quite a bit of planning and preparation before attempting it. The inevitable problem I knew I would face eventually was the game crashing, so I installed some mods. I only used 2 mods. The proper save mod was an absolute necessity for this run. It saves the game at the beginning of every stage, and it not only allowed me to reload the game in the event of a crash, but it also allowed me to close the application when I wasn't playing. The other mod was Stutter Stunter, and all that did was help optimize the game and reduce lag. Other than that, the game was completely vanilla. Another problem was knowing where to even begin attempting this. I knew I wanted to do this run on Monsoon with the artifact of Metamorphosis, which switches the survivor every stage. This was just to switch the game up and make the run as interesting as possible. There's also something really cool you can do with this artifact that I'll talk about in a second. But the problem with this artifact is it doesn't fit a specific playstyle. It's simple to tailor a run around one specific character, but it's more difficult to pick items for a character with one of 10 potential movesets. For example, Bleeds on Commando, great. Bleeds on Loader, not so great. Bungus on Engineer, great. Bungus on Captain, no. I did about a dozen practice runs and concluded that crit glasses and elemental bands are the most consistently powerful items, especially the latter. And speaking of consistency, the biggest issue in those runs was getting Commando in the first and sometimes second loop. The problem with Commando is he's the only survivor that doesn't have a consistent way to activate the bands within his moveset. He can only do it with certain equipment or the right items. So if you get him and you don't have the right equipment or items, it can be very difficult to progress. Generally, by the 3rd loop, you'll have enough items that it's okay if you get Commando. All this to say, the first 15 stages are incredibly luck dependent. You need the right items, the right characters, and a decent amount of skill on top of that. At this point, I could A, not use the artifact of Metamorphosis, which I didn't want to do. B, throw dozens of attempts at it and just hope I got lucky, which, again, I didn't want to do. Or C, use another artifact to mitigate the RNG. The most obvious solution is the artifact of command, but that artifact is dumb and it's fucking stupid. It makes the game piss easy and then just a pain in the ass after you've already set up. Instead, the solution I came up with was to use the artifact of sacrifice to farm on the first stage for about an hour before jumping into the challenge. Another benefit of sacrifice is the fact I don't have to waste any time farming chests. I can just go straight to the teleporter. Using this strategy, I got a run going on my first try.
Due to feces thrown all over the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and it stunk so bad.
The first 4 stages were pretty easy, and I was able to clear them without much of an issue. But there was a huge difficulty spike when I got to stage 5 and the first loop. This was by far the hardest part of the run. My items at this point weren't bad, and I was able to deal a significant amount of damage with my 4 ice bands, but my proc chains weren't powerful enough to take out large groups of enemies, so I had to kill them one at a time. The enemies were really powerful at this point, and almost all of them were capable of killing me in 2 hits. This made it very hard to focus on any specific enemy, as I would get overwhelmed after staying in an area for more than a few seconds. I basically had to run laps around the entire stage at all times, which was a huge pain in the tuchus for charging the teleporter. Stage 8 alone took me more than 20 minutes to clear. Luckily stage 9 went a bit quicker and that only took me about 7 minutes, but I was barely scraping by. Realistically, I shouldn't have been alive at this point, so as soon as I got to stage 10, I did the code for the artifact of command. And I know I said I hated it, but it was really my only option at this point, as I was more than likely to fail on the stage 10 teleporter. The items I got from the Ambry didn't help me out that much because I had most of the green-white items by now. Instead, the biggest boost to my power happened on stage 11 when I got Captain for the first time. Captain's passive, defensive microbots are incredibly effective as they block the majority of enemy projectiles. What's cool is unlike the other survivors, Captain's passive is unique in that it's applied to the player as an item. This extensively means the microbots are a permanent upgrade, even on the other 9 survivors. The microbots helped me immensely in this run. It took an enormous amount of pressure off and allowed me to focus on dealing damage instead of running away like a little bitch. The microbots can also shoot down Celestine Spikes and Void Reaver Blasts, which are some of the biggest threats late game. Fun fact, it's possible to get the microbots on any character without Metamorphosis if you happen to get Captain during the Metamorphosis trial in Bulwark's Ambry.
I bought a whole bunch of Shungite rocks. Do you know what Shungite is?
The second and third loops were a lot easier. This is where the Artifact of Sacrifice really shined due to it being really powerful late game. Or I guess in this case it'd be early game, but whatever. I also got a Shatter Spleen on stage 13, which helped out a lot. My power was scaling faster than the enemies, and after stage 25, my biggest enemy was lag. I was having massive frame drops, especially during the teleporter events. Luckily, I was powerful enough that it didn't matter that much, but all it would have taken is a lag spike during a Void Reaver explosion to end my run. Stage 29 was probably the worst it ever got. Sundered Grove lags my game when I'm just playing normally, but combining it with 29 stages of Monsoon difficulty scaling makes the game run like a slurry of diarrhea. For stages 30 and onward, I changed my equipment from the Royal Capacitor to a Blast Shower because it refreshes the Elemental Band cooldown. I had enough fuel cells and Gestures of the Drowned to have it up constantly. Additionally, my proc chains were really powerful and almost every hit was able to activate my bands. By this point, the monsters had billions of health and the bands were by far the best way to deal damage. Around stage 50, I started looking for focus convergences, convergi, whatever. These doodads can stack up to 3 and make the teleporter twice as efficient, basically making the run take half the time. Needless to say, these were an absolute necessity for this run. Also by stage 50, about 95% of the enemies were scavengers, and the explanation as to why this happened is pretty complicated and I have a hard time understanding it myself, but I'll try to explain these to the best of my ability, so try to follow along. Alright, so almost everything that happens in Risk of Rain 2 is determined by a director. Directors are AIs responsible for spawning shrines, teleporters, teleporter bosses, monsters, all that junk. What we're interested in are the combat directors, which determine monster spawns. There are 2 types of combat directors, instantaneous, which aren't really relevant right now, so I'm not going to talk about them. There's also continuous, which activate then deactivate themselves based on various conditions. The continuous directors determine the monsters that spawn before and during a teleporter event. There are 2 standard continuous combat directors, a fast one and a slow one. Credit is gained every second, and the amount of credit gained is dependent on the current difficulty and credit multiplier. It's a little more complicated than that, but that should give you a general idea. The fast combat director uses its credits every 4.5 to 9 seconds. The slow one does it every 22.5 to 30 seconds. Once a director uses its credits, it spawns a monster based off of this chart. It's important to note that the director won't spawn anything that's too cheap, which is why it's rare to see these low-cost enemies as the difficulty increases. Additionally, the cost is multiplied by the monster's tier of elite. As you can see, the most expensive monster here is an overloading worm with a cost of 4,000, then scavengers in second with a cost of 2,000. This really confused me. I didn't understand why so many scavengers were spawning when overloading worms were clearly at the top of the food chain, but apparently scavengers can spawn as elites, meaning they get their spawn cost multiplied. However, you'd be forgiven for not knowing that, because unlike every other fucking enemy in the game, elite scavengers don't have elemental aspects. What's more, the old guillotines don't work on them. This drove me insane. I spent hours trying to figure out why scavengers were the only monsters spawning, and to my knowledge, this information is nowhere on the wiki. I probably never would have figured it out if it weren't for this good Samaritan in the Risk of Rain 2 Discord, so thank you, sir. I'll link some other videos in the description that go more in depth with directors, but I hope that made sense. Moving on. Another interesting thing that happened around stage 50 was the amount of money I was earning. Because money scales with difficulty, I had more money than God in just a few kills. In fact, I had so much bread that I was in debt. What happened here was I reached the 32-bit integer limit, and if you have no idea what I just said, here's a quick explanation. A bit is a single character in binary, expressed with either a 1 or a 0. When put in a string, these bits represent different values. More bits in a sequence means a greater number of values that can be expressed. Risk of Rain 2 has a 32-bit integer limit, meaning it expresses all of its values with 32 ones and zeros. The largest number that can be expressed with 32 bits is this number right here. If something exceeds this number, it causes overflow, which can cause all kinds of weird effects. In this case, it causes the value to be negative. This is also why on stage 89, the Alloy Worship unit had negative health. What's interesting though, is if it has negative health, you'd expect it to either die instantly or be completely invincible. However, I was somehow able to lower its health bar even though the health number didn't change. I have no idea why this happened. If anybody has an idea on why this might be, feel free to leave a comment. Alright, enough technical mumbo jumbo. Moving on. For real this time.
Hey, Disputed Origin. Yeah, I've got to fix my audio.
On stage 81, I noticed the Shrines of Combat weren't working anymore. They'd still spawn in, but they wouldn't do anything, as if they'd already been used. Another weird thing happened on stage 108. After charging the teleporter, the game would not let me exit the stage. It had a really hard time accepting my money for some reason, and it took over 3 minutes from the time I used the teleporter to the time I actually left. Luckily, this was the only time this happened in the run, so it didn't slow me down too much. There were more alloy worship shenanigans on stage 129 after I destroyed all the eggs. He spawned, but without a health bar. What's more is he died very quickly and didn't even drop a red item. Once again, I have no idea what's going on with this buffoonery, but I am very curious. I had my first crash on stage 139 when I went into the Gilded Coast without thinking. Like I said before, I had the proper save mod, so reloading the game wasn't an issue. But if it crashed every time I reloaded, there would be nothing I could do. Fortunately, I was able to get back in and leave the stage upon reloading, but I decided I wasn't going to mess with any of the hidden realms going forward. It was also around this point sometimes nothing would spawn. It was very off and on, but as time went on, it started happening more and more. Stage 182 was the last stage that actually had enemies spawning. After 182, the monsters went out to buy a pack of cigs, never to return. Growing up without a strong father figure can seriously stun a child's development, and what am I talking about? Oh yeah, nothing spawned after stage 182, with a couple of exceptions, like the aforementioned Alloy Worship Unit and the Elemental Elder Lumerians on Abandoned Aqueducts, but besides that, it was a very desolate and lonely 818 stages. The only thing that kept me company were my 4 beetle guards. Something funny happens with them on really high stages. If you have a mired urn, you can basically suck them to death. I cheated to get this footage because I didn't end up getting a mired urn in my game, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but once again, I have no idea why this is happening. Once monsters stopped spawning, I made it a mini goal to get an Irradiant Pearl for the first time in my life. Because I was using the Artifact of Sacrifice, the only way I could get items at this point was through rusted chests and legendary chests on Abyssal Depths and Suttered Grove. But I could, however, get lunar items at the bazaar using my abundance of lunar coins that are totally legit and not cheated at all. I wasted a ton of time hunting down newt altars and collecting lunar items. After that, I just had to hunt down cleansing pools to exchange them. I couldn't do them all at once because these goddamn squids kept lagging my game after every couple hits, but eventually on stage 268, this happened. Oh! Poggers! We got 2! Before I even realized I had gotten one, a second one was bestowed upon me. There is supposedly a 1 in 25 chance of getting an Irradiant Pearl, but it took me 55 tries just to get this one, and then only 3 hits to get my second one. It would have been a lot cooler if I got them back to back, but the chances of that happening are 0.16%, so I'm not very disappointed. Irradiant Pearls boost all stats, which is nice, albeit not very useful at this point in the run. There's really not much else to say about this run. I found this weird graphical glitch on stage 435. I'm not entirely sure what causes this, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with the camera acting weirdly when positioned inside the teleporter on Sky Meadows. I'm sure I'm not the first to find this, but I thought it was pretty interesting. The last thing to talk about before the boss fight is, yet again, the Alloy Worship Unit. Up until stage 444, it was just spawning as a normal enemy, and it wouldn't drop any red items. But on stage 444, upon breaking the eggs, my game crashed. I thought maybe this was a one-time occurrence, but sure enough, when I loaded the game back up, breaking the eggs crashed my game again. For some reason, breaking the eggs on Siren's Call would now break the game. This isn't incredibly surprising. I expected something like this to happen, but what I don't understand is why stage 444, when absolutely nothing has happened for the last 250 stages, what changed between stage 439 and 444? This is the biggest question I have concerning this run, and I wish I had an explanation for you guys, but I just don't. But whatever, it's no big deal, right? All I have to do is not break the eggs. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. These eggs are so dainty, and they break at the drop of a hat. With the amount of items I had at this point, even walking near the eggs could destroy them. Sometimes the beetle guards would smash them, and sometimes the fireworks from the teleporter would hit them. From this point on, my game would crash 90% of the time I entered Siren's Call. Fortunately, both Rally Point Delta and Scorched Acres have guaranteed newt altars, so I could enter the bazaar to avoid this stage altogether. The downside is tracking down the altar, going to the bazaar, selecting the stage, and leaving takes time. Even if you figure that only takes about a minute, apply that to the remaining 566 stages in the run, and I had to do this 113 times, which adds almost 2 hours to the run. That's insanely unoptimal, but a single crash probably would have taken about a minute to reload anyway, so I didn't have much of a choice. But besides that, the rest of this run was extremely uneventful. All I could do was turn my brain off as I trekked through stage after stage for hours. Before I talk about the boss fight, I made a little montage. I spent far too much time on this, so I hope you enjoy. Going into the boss fight, I had a couple theories on what might happen, mainly based on my experience with the Alloy Worship unit. Theory 1, nothing strange happens, and Mithrix behaves normally. Theory 2, Mithrix has a negative health bar, making him practically unkillable. Theory 3, Mithrix still spawns, but not as a boss, so killing him would soft lock the game, as I wouldn't be able to proceed. And Theory 4, the game crashes, which would have been the most anticlimactic ending possible, but that didn't happen. And none of my theories were correct, so I'm just gonna play the clip and talk about it afterwards. Alright, let's see what happens. I'm very curious about his health. Oh. He doesn't have a health bar. What the fuck? What? I'm sorry. Alright, this is it. I guess I can leave? Okay. Chat. That was fucking... I don't know what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't that. What happened here was actually pretty close to my third theory. For some reason, Mithrix didn't spawn as a boss, but instead a normal enemy with a yellow health bar. So once the first phase began, the game didn't recognize him as a boss, so it thought he was already defeated. As a result, it immediately spawned the Flifties and Flimbos for phase 2. And those behaved normally, but once those were gone, it started phase 3. But once again, the game didn't recognize Mithrix as a boss, so it instantly started phase 4. Same thing happens again on phase 4, but this time it starts the escape sequence, despite the fact Mithrix is still stealing all my items. Somehow I managed to kill him before he finished taking everything, which wasn't supposed to happen, but I suppose at this point nothing was working properly anyway, so I'm not surprised. And before everyone comments about how I should have hit the Shrine of Order, don't, because I did it before I finished the run. For those unaware, there's a Shrine of Order on the last stage under the bridge. I didn't do it until now because all it would have done is killed the run. No matter what I got, I wouldn't have been able to deal enough damage. To be honest, I don't understand why you guys think it's so fucking cool. Hey, you know it'd be epic if you hit the Shrine of Order? That'd be awesome. No, it wouldn't. If anything, it'd make the run more boring. For example, what if I did it and it just turned all my white items into crit classes? I already had max crit, so it would have been pointless. In addition to the comments you just saw, I got asked this so many times on stream. If I had $1 trillion for every time I got asked to hit a Shrine of Order, I'd be richer than Jeff fucking Bezos. I realize even bringing this up is gonna make a bunch of you comment it just to spite me, but joke's on you, all that's gonna do is boost this video in the algorithm.
Who's laughing now?
Jokes aside, I do appreciate everyone who comments. I just thought it was funny how many times I've been asked to do this. I'm not actually upset. On that note, I think I've covered just about everything. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. It would really help me out, and I have a bunch of cool stuff planned this year. I stream this challenge live on Twitch. Link is on screen and in the description. This is where I'm going to be doing most of the filming for future videos because it's an incredibly convenient way to record long runs like this without filling up terabytes of data on my hard drive. It's also just fun interacting with you guys, which is why I also made a Discord. Anyway, thanks for watching. Sorry for the long delay between uploads. I know this video is kind of long and it had a lot more theory crafting and explanations of mechanics than I would have liked, so thanks for getting this far. Alright, ta-ta for now. That's going to be my thing now. A lot of YouTubers have a thing, like a catchphrase or a physical maneuver they do at the start or end of their videos. Ta-ta for now is my thing. It's my slogan. I've coined it. The fuck am I talking about?